Marshall, it's time for another Q&A.
Oh. Jimmy Coons 1 says, can you tell me how thin the sides should be and how to bend the wood? Where did you get that heat bar, or can I make something? Depending on your model, like a typical tortoise side will be in the range of well, I've seen them under a millimeter at the thickest part, to, modern sides, I kind of like to be around 1.5 to 1.7. That's me personally, so that scares a lot of makers. So I'd say no more than 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters is fairly thick, and it takes a lot more effort to bend. Regarding the heat bar, here we go. This is a section of a spinnaker from a sailboat. Go to your local marina, they're bobbing around, just find one, and you only need about a foot. But, I'm joking. We ended up getting this from a boatyard that they just kind of had a pile, and we found it, and it had good curves. You don't have to use something exactly like this, but they're fairly common to find. We have a couple L brackets, and these are, I think, about $3 a set, maybe $4, I don't know. And this is just a piece of cherry. As you can see, we've got a very carefully hewn, and we've had some scarring and scorching over the years of putting the blowtorch in and out, and we're just using a standard blowtorch. And because we've done this so much, and we do this a lot, we have a very accurate line saying, put it into the bench about this far. And that puts the blowtorch just at the right level. You can spend money on these sorts of things, but this is something that we've made, and as you can tell, we use it quite a lot. Thank you. This is actually one of my favorite homemade tools because it just works. It's simple, there's nothing fancy about it, and it works. So the next few questions, I'm going to lump them together because clearly I didn't explain it well enough. It's about the neck joint. Is the whole block glued to the sides or just a spline? What happens to that block? So in that video, what I failed to mention is that spline, the Spanish cedar spline that I have, gets glued into the body, and I'll take that, put glue into the slot, and I'll tap it in because I make sure that it's hammer tight because I want a very good tight joint. And then I'll put glue onto the entire... Let me get a neck. Imagine there's a spline here, and I've got the spline already into the guitar. What I'll do at that point, and by the way, this would also be shaped, I would cover the whole portion here with glue along with the slot, and then I'll carefully roll it onto the guitar, ideally facing in the right direction, with the spline in there, so that the spline is completely captured and everything fits really, really tight. And by tight, I mean I'm taking my hammer and tapping it in, going back and forth, at which point I know it seats home when I see glue go through the end grain of that spline. That's the ideal level of tightness. The corollary to this is, can a Spanish foot be used for a steel string? Absolutely. Let me grab my Spanish foot. A Spanish foot. As you can tell, there is no break inside of the Spanish foot. It is a solid piece of wood. So the tension is not going to pull the wood apart. A jackhammer ended up pulling this wood apart, and that's how I ended up with this broken up guitar. So bonus question, how did I get this guitar? Somebody was going into a safe and hit it, and it was beyond saving because they hit it in many places. But yes, a solid piece of wood is stronger than any joint. I have my first factory-made steel string guitar from when I first started learning, and it plays well enough, but it's a very boring guitar with a very dull and lifeless sound. I was wondering what could be done, if anything, to breathe some life into it. There's a few things. First of all, when was the last time you changed your strings? Because a lot of times, guitars sound kind of dull because the strings are really, really old. And it's from, your skin oils and dirt and whatever getting stuck in between the windings, therefore making it less flexible And when it's less flexible, then you don't get all the high overtones. So that's probably the first bit. Second bit is, if you really want to change the sound, you have to think really, really hard, because once you start taking away wood on the inside, there's really not a whole lot that you can do. Probably the two biggest things that you could do to really enhance the sound quality is to adjust the saddle, and I don't mean by raising or lowering, but changing the angle, because a lot of factory guitars were left with an edge that looks like this, or maybe like this. But if you bring it up to a good solid peak where you have a single vibrationary point, that'll give you the best sound. And likewise on the nut, because after years of the bass strings going up and down and pressure and time and so on and so forth, that's going to wear those slots down a bit. So maybe you need to crispen up the edge. Beyond that, I would say leave the guitar as it is, because you fell in love with that guitar for a reason. And if you're going in and changing things, it will make it a different guitar. I'm not going to say better, I'm not going to say worse, but it's really hard to put wood back after it's gone. Great question. This is the fastest way to string up a classical guitar I've ever seen, and the tips are great. I'll be using this method from now on, referring to my string, how to change strings on a classical guitar. Thank you. I change a lot of strings. I go through a lot of strings, 10 to 50 sets a week throughout my shop between here and the showroom typically. And, I don't want to spend all day changing strings. I want to be able to get a set of strings on and off really quickly. And, when I come across a guitar that is double threaded at the head or triple threaded at the head with a knot and has the entire length of string wrapped around it, it kind of makes me a little bit frustrated, because I want to be able to get the strings off, do whatever I have to do, and then put the strings back on. And if I'm, having to grab out like a pick like this to dig a string out, I would really, really not have to do that, because, this runs the potential of getting in there. Or sometimes, where is it? I'll have to get in there with these and start cutting stuff, which again runs the potential of damaging the guitar. And I always think about it from the standpoint of somebody in a concert. And yes, I know that the likelihood of breaking a string in concert is very low. It's not nothing. Back when I was performing a lot, I've broken strings in the middle of a set. And the last thing I ever want to do is to have to struggle to change strings. Once a concert starts, it kind of has its own inertia and momentum that must be maintained. So if you're sitting there and using the parketing method where you thread all the strings across, yes, that's a wonderful way of keeping it very nice, organized, and tidy without having the possibility of a string slipping. It also makes it really difficult, because if you break, say, your D string, because those strings never break, you have to take off at least one or two other strings to be able to get that out, or you have to somehow get that apart. So I look at it from the standpoint of what's best for my time in the shop and what's best for if something were to happen inside of a concert. And the way that I put the strings on, if when I'm changing the strings, I'll cut all the strings over the sound hole, and then all I have to do is unwrap the head and pull in the opposite direction. So basically, if I pull away from the nut, everything slips out. It's really fast, really easy, but it also doesn't slip. You mentioned that I do not like double top guitars because of the difficulties of repairs. But if you were to focus solely on the sound and playability of a guitar, do any of the modern bracing or voicing techniques impress you? Yes, sometimes. Depends on how it's done. I've heard some lattice tops, especially ones made by my friend Stephen Walter. He makes really fabulous lattice brace guitars. I think that those are quite impressive. I like mine because a lot of my guitars are not necessarily just the traditional 7 fans. I've developed a number of my own patterns, and you can hear those in some other videos. I like my guitars, or else I wouldn't build them, So, you know, I'm not some old, well, I guess I am getting old, but happens to the best of us. I'm not some old fuddy-duddy who doesn't want to progress with the guitars. I want to experience the sounds that I like in a more modern fashion. So yes, I do like a lot of the newer bracing patterns and systems. For me, my biggest issue is that a lot of them are not repairable. So speaking from a repair standpoint, it's very difficult to recommend building in that fashion. But if you like it, great, go for it. And yes, I can fix them. It's just a lot more work. The biggest issue for me is that a lot of the modern systems use synthetic glues, and yeah, not as many as previously, but that is always an issue. So I don't like to work on the synthetic glues because they always cause problems. Thank you. Those are your questions. You asked it, I answered it. What more can we ask for? Except I'm going to ask you for more questions, and like, subscribe. If you like this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help make this possible. Keep building, keep asking those questions, and I love all this. Thank you so much. See you next time.